The wind howled across the empty plains, rolling through the tall, dry grass that stretched for miles beneath a sky the color of old tin. The sun had started its slow descent behind the distant hills, turning the horizon the color of rust and blood. A wagon creaked along the dirt trail, its wheels groaning against the ruts left by others who'd passed before. Inside, a woman sat clutching the edge of the seat, her gloved fingers trembling against the wood. Her bonnet had loosened in the wind, and a few strands of dark hair brushed against her face, but she didn't bother to fix them. Her eyes were fixed ahead, on the figure riding beside the wagon. The rancher rode a chestnut horse, his posture straight, his hat pulled low to block the setting sun. He hadn't said much since they'd left the last homestead, only nodding when she'd asked how much farther they had to go. But something in the way he scanned the horizon, his hand never far from the worn handle of his revolver, made her uneasy. The trail was too quiet. Even the crickets seemed to have lost their song. The woman had come west looking for peace, not trouble. 2 months ago, she'd answered a letter, an offer of work at a ranch on the edge of the New Mexico territory. She'd lost everything back east, the farm, her father, the last bit of hope she'd been holding on to. The rancher's letter had promised steady wages, food, and shelter. She'd thought maybe, just maybe, the wilderness would give her a fresh start. But now, with the wind biting through her coat and the silence stretching like a noose around them, she wasn't so sure. A coyote's cry split the dusk. The rancher's horse shifted beneath him, restless. He looked toward the sound, his eyes narrowing. "Keep your voice low," he said, his tone quiet but firm. "We're not alone out here." Her heart quickened. She glanced around, seeing only shadows crawling across the open land. "You mean animals?" she asked. He didn't answer right away. His hand rested fully on his gun now. "No," he said finally. "Not animals." The wagon lurched over a rock, jolting her forward. She steadied herself, gripping the sideboard. "Then who?" He turned his gaze toward the ridgeline. For a moment, she thought she saw movement there, just a flicker, the outline of something or someone watching them. But when she blinked, it was gone. "Folks who don't like trespassers," the rancher said. "This land used to belong to them. Some still think it does." She looked at him, trying to read the expression on his weathered face. "Are you saying we're in danger?" He gave a faint smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Not yet," he said. "But if we don't reach the ranch before dark, we might be." The words sat heavy between them. The woman swallowed hard, glancing again at the horizon. The last light was fading fast, and the air had turned cold enough to sting her nose. The trail twisted down into a shallow valley, where the land grew rough and uneven. In the distance, a faint glow appeared. Firelight, maybe. "There," she whispered, spotting it. The rancher didn't respond. He slowed his horse and stared at the light, his brow furrowed. "That shouldn't be there," he said under his breath. "What do you mean?" "That's not the ranch." The wagon rolled to a stop. For a moment, all she could hear was the wind and the uneasy creak of the wagon wheels. Then faintly came the sound of laughter, low, distant, and wrong. Her stomach turned. "Should we go back?" He shook his head slowly. "Too late for that. If someone's out there, they've already seen us." She looked to him for guidance, but his eyes were still fixed on that glow in the distance. The light flickered and swayed, as if several torches were being carried through the dark. Then came another sound, the faint jingle of spurs, the sharp crack of a rifle being cocked. The rancher reached into his coat and pulled out his revolver. "Get down," he said. She slid off the seat, her hands shaking as she crouched behind the wagon wheel. The horse stamped nervously, nostrils flaring. The air felt heavy, charged with something unseen. A shadow moved near the edge of the firelight, then another. Men, maybe 5 or 6, their faces obscured by the dark. One of them called out, his voice deep and cold. "You're on the wrong land, friend." The rancher didn't answer. He just kept his eyes steady, his finger resting lightly on the trigger. "You know who this land belongs to," the voice said again. "You should have stayed on your side of the ridge." The woman's breath caught. She wanted to ask who they were, what they wanted, but her voice refused to come. The rancher leaned slightly toward her and whispered, "When I tell you, you run. Don't look back." Her eyes widened. "Run where?" she hissed. "Doesn't matter. Away." The men stepped closer, their boots crunching against the dry earth. The glow from their torches revealed rough faces, wide hats, rifles gleaming in the firelight. They looked like cowhands, but their eyes held something colder. One of them raised his gun. "Drop your weapon, cowboy. No need for anyone to die tonight." The rancher didn't move. His voice stayed calm. "We're just passing through," the man with the rifle sneered. Ain't no one just passing through. You knew what land this was. The air was thick with tension. The woman's pulse thundered in her ears. She could see the rancher's jaw tighten, could see the way his hand steadied despite the danger. Then, in a low voice meant only for her, he whispered something that froze her blood. Her heart stopped. She stared at him, unable to speak, unable to believe what she'd just heard. Before she could ask what he meant, one of the men shouted, "Now!" A gunshot split the night. The wagon horse screamed and reared, the reins snapping from her hands. Dust filled the air. The woman fell hard, the world spinning around her. Through the haze, she saw the rancher fire back, one shot after another, his figure lit by the muzzle flash. She crawled toward the brush, her lungs burning, her ears ringing with the chaos. But she couldn't shake the echo of his whisper, those few words that made her question everything. The sound of hooves thundered somewhere close. Someone shouted her name, or maybe it was just the wind. Then silence fell, heavy and sudden. When she lifted her head, the firelight was gone. The night swallowed everything. The only thing she could hear was the faint creak of the wagon wheel turning slowly, back and forth, as if the land itself was holding its breath. She didn't know if the rancher was still alive, or if the men who had come for them were waiting in the dark. All she knew was that whatever he'd whispered, it changed everything. And as the cold night deepened, she realized that whatever was coming next would decide whether either of them lived to see the dawn. The night swallowed everything. For a long time, she didn't dare move, afraid even the sound of her breath might give her away. The air was sharp with the smell of gunpowder and dust. Somewhere out in the dark, a horse whinnied, a broken, fearful sound that echoed against the empty plains. Then came silence again, deep and unnatural. Her hands trembled as she pressed herself lower against the ground. The earth was cold beneath her palms, the grit biting into her skin. She strained to listen, trying to catch any sign of movement, any whisper of a voice. Nothing. Only the endless hum of the wind moving through the grass. The rancher's words still rang in her ears. What he'd whispered before the shooting started, those few low, deliberate words didn't sound like fear. They sounded like a warning, one meant for her alone. She tried to make sense of it, but the meaning kept slipping through her mind like water through her fingers. She turned her head slightly, scanning the dark. The firelight was gone, smothered or carried off. Her wagon stood crooked, one wheel sunk deep into the earth. The horse lay still beside it, its body blocking part of the trail. The sight made her throat tighten, but she forced herself not to cry. Not now. Not here. Somewhere beyond the ridge, she thought she heard a faint groan. Low, human, wounded. She hesitated, every instinct screaming for her to stay put. But if that sound was the rancher, she couldn't just leave him. He had risked his life to protect her. She couldn't walk away without knowing. Moving slowly, she crawled toward the sound. The ground was uneven, scattered with rocks and dry weeds that snagged her skirt. Each time she shifted her weight, the earth seemed to groan beneath her knees. The wind picked up again, carrying with it the faint smell of smoke and something else, something metallic like rust or blood. When she reached the edge of a shallow gully, she stopped. The moon had begun to rise, pale and thin, giving the land a ghostly glow. Down below, she saw a figure lying still. The broad hat, the worn coat, it was him, the rancher. Her heart hammered as she slid down the slope. "Hey," she whispered, barely daring to speak. "Can you hear me?" He didn't answer. She reached out, her fingers brushing his arm. He stirred, a low sound escaping his throat. Relief flooded through her. "You're alive," she breathed. He winced as he tried to move, his hand clutching his side. "Stay low," he murmured. "They're still out there." She glanced around. "I don't see anyone." "You won't," he said. "Not yet. They know these plains better than anyone." She swallowed hard. "Who are they?" For a moment, he didn't answer. Then, in a voice rough with pain, he said, "Men who used to work this land, before it was stolen from them." His words hung heavy between them. She could see the exhaustion in his face now, the way his jaw clenched as he tried to steady his breathing. The front of his shirt was dark with blood, though he seemed more concerned with scanning the horizon than tending to the wound. She tore a strip from her skirt and pressed it against his side. "You need to stop the bleeding." He gave a faint, humorless smile. "You're wasting your cloth, miss. If they want us dead, a bit of blood won't change that." "You're not dying out here," she said firmly. "Not after what you just did." He looked at her for a long moment, then gave a slow nod. "You've got more grit than I thought." A branch cracked in the distance. She froze. He motioned for silence, his hand gripping his revolver, though his strength was fading. The sound came again, faint footsteps moving through the grass, circling. She held her breath, praying whoever it was would keep moving. Minutes passed. Then the noise faded. The wind shifted direction. The tension didn't. When he finally spoke again, his voice was softer. "You came a long way for this job." She nodded, still keeping her eyes on the dark. "I didn't have anywhere else to go." "You picked the wrong ranch," he said quietly. She looked at him. "You mean, you knew?" He exhaled slowly. "I knew the land was cursed one way or another. Folks used to whisper about this valley, said bad things happened here long before any of us arrived. But when I came west, I didn't believe in that sort of talk. I thought land was land. Turns out I was wrong. What happened here?" she asked. He hesitated. "There was a family once, settled here back before the war. Built a ranch, ran cattle, made a name for themselves. Then one winter, a sickness swept through the village nearby. They say the rancher refused to help, wouldn't share his supplies. Half the village died. The survivors swore revenge." Her skin prickled. "So they killed him?" "They burned the place to the ground. Thought that would be the end of it. But something about this land, it doesn't forget. Every few years, someone tries to build here again. Every time it ends the same way." The wind shifted again, carrying a faint whisper that might have been the grass, or might have been something else. She shivered. "So why come back?" she asked. He met her eyes. "Because I don't believe in curses. I believe in men, and I know men can be far worse than ghosts." Before she could answer, a distant whistle broke through the night. A sharp, deliberate sound. The rancher's eyes hardened. "They're calling to each other," he said. "They're closing in." She scanned the shadows. "What do we do?" He pushed himself upright with effort. "We move. The creek runs about a mile north. If we follow it, it'll take us to the old mill. No one's used it in years. We can hide there until morning." She helped him to his feet, his weight heavy against her shoulder. They moved slowly, every step cautious, the dry grass whispering under their boots. The moon climbed higher, silvering the landscape, making every shadow seem alive. Behind them, faint lights flickered, lanterns swinging in the dark. They reached the creek at last, its narrow ribbon of water glinting faintly under the moon. The sound of it was a relief, soft and constant. But even as they followed its curve, she couldn't shake the feeling they were being watched. The rancher seemed to sense it too. Every few yards he'd stop and listen, his gaze cutting through the dark like a blade. Finally, they saw it. The outline of an old wooden building, half collapsed but still standing. The mill. Inside, the air was thick with dust and the faint smell of old grain. Broken tools and rusted nails lay scattered across the floor. They sank down near a wall, catching their breath. For the first time since the shooting started, the woman let herself exhale. But even as she did, the rancher's expression stayed grim. "They won't stop," he said. "Not until they find us." She rubbed her arms against the cold. "Why, what do they want?" He looked at her for a long moment, then said quietly, "They think I took something from them." Her heart skipped. "Did you?" He didn't answer right away. Then, in a low voice, he said, "Not in the way they think." Before she could ask more, the sound of a horse's snort broke through the silence. Then another. The light of a lantern swept across the window, cutting through the dust and darkness like a blade. The woman's breath caught. The rancher pulled his revolver, motioning for her to stay quiet. Boots crunched outside, voices murmuring, too close now. She pressed herself flat against the floor, her heart pounding so hard she thought they might hear it. One of the men spoke, his tone cold and steady. "We know you're in there." The rancher's grip tightened. She could see the lines of strain in his face, the way his eyes shifted toward the back door. He leaned close, his whisper barely audible. "If we make a run for it, follow the creek. Don't stop. No matter what happens, keep going." She shook her head, tears brimming in her eyes. "I'm not leaving you." He gave a faint, tired smile. "You will if you want to live." The door creaked as someone tried the handle. Then silence again, the kind that comes before something breaks. The woman held her breath. Outside, a match struck. The glow of it flickered through the cracks in the wall, and for a moment, the rancher's face was bathed in orange light. His eyes met hers, calm but fierce. "Whatever happens next," he whispered, "you didn't see what I buried out here. You didn't hear what I told you." She frowned, confused, but before she could speak, the match dropped. The faint smell of smoke filled the air, and through the open window, she saw the first edge of flame curling along the dry grass outside. Her stomach turned to ice. The men weren't just hunting them now. They were going to burn them out. The rancher looked at her once more, his voice steady despite the fire beginning to glow at the edges of the dark. "Now," he said softly, "run." "They think I took something from them," the rancher said, his voice low, rough as gravel. "But they're wrong about what it is." The woman frowned, confused. "What could be worth all this?" He didn't answer right away. He stared through the cracks in the wall at the dark silhouettes moving in the distance. "This land has secrets," he murmured. "Things folks buried and forgot. But not everyone forgot the same way." Outside, the voices drifted closer, men shouting faintly to one another as they searched. The crackle of fire had grown louder. The glow flickered along the edge of the creek, lighting the mill's walls like a warning. She could feel the heat beginning to lick through the boards. She turned back to the rancher, whispering, "We can't stay here." "The fire's spreading." He nodded weakly, pressing a hand to his wounded side. "There's a tunnel under the mill," he said. "Old storage line. It leads to the gulch on the far end. If we can reach it, we can get out unseen." She moved quickly, searching through the debris-strewn floor until her foot struck something hollow. She knelt and pulled away a half-rotted plank, revealing a dark opening. The smell of damp earth drifted up. "Go," he said. She hesitated. "You first." "You're hurt." He shook his head. "You won't be able to pull me through if I fall." "You go first, I'll follow." The sound of footsteps outside grew louder. She took one last look at him, then dropped into the hole, landing in soft dirt. The tunnel was narrow, low enough that she had to crouch. A faint trickle of water ran through it, echoing like whispers. The rancher climbed down behind her, breathing hard. Together they began to move, their hands brushing against the rough wooden supports as they crawled forward. The light from above vanished completely. "Keep going," he said quietly. "We're almost through." The passage opened slightly, and she could see a faint shimmer of moonlight ahead. Relief welled inside her, until a voice echoed down the tunnel from behind. "Found him." Gunfire split the air. Dirt sprayed around them. The rancher grabbed her arm and pulled her toward the opening, shouting, "Run!" They burst out onto the open ground, stumbling into the gulch. The air outside was cool, the firelight distant now but still visible. The rancher leaned heavily against her, gasping. She could see the pain etched across his face, the exhaustion dragging him down. "We need to keep moving," she said, her voice shaking. "They'll come around." He nodded, but his legs were unsteady. "There's a cabin about half a mile up the gulch. Belonged to a trapper I knew years back. If it's still standing, we'll be safe for a bit." They followed the creek bed, the moonlight washing everything in silver. The woman's mind raced with questions she didn't dare ask yet. What did he mean by secrets buried in the land? What had he taken or protected that was worth dying for? As they walked, faint echoes of gunfire faded into the distance. The plains stretched endlessly, quiet except for the low murmur of water and the rustling grass. After a long silence, she said softly, "What you whispered before they attacked, what did you mean?" He looked at her, his face unreadable. "You remember that?" "I can't forget it," she said. "You told me they weren't after me. You said it like..." She trailed off. "Like I knew it would happen," he finished for her. "Did you?" He didn't answer right away. The sound of his boots crunching in the dirt filled the space between them. "Let's just say I've seen that same fire before," he said finally. "Different men, same hate. It always ends the same way." The cabin came into view, a weathered building half hidden by the slope, its roof sagging but still intact. The door hung crooked on its hinges. They slipped inside, closing it behind them. Inside it smelled of dust and pine. A few old tools lay scattered near the hearth. The woman helped him sit against the wall, then checked his wound again. The bleeding had slowed, but his skin was pale. "You need a doctor," she said quietly. He gave a weak smile. "Closest one's 2 days away. I'll settle for some whiskey and clean cloth." She found a canteen on a shelf and handed it to him. He took a long drink, then looked at her with tired eyes. "You want to know the truth about what's happening?" She nodded. He leaned his head back against the wall. "The men out there, they think I stole a deed. Years back, this land was sold off by force. A man named Cutter bought it cheap after the war, pushed everyone else out. But before he died, he left behind a second deed, one that proved the land wasn't his to sell. It's the only thing that could take this place back from the people who ruined it." "So you found it," she said. "I did, buried in an old strongbox under the east field. I didn't take it for money, though. I wanted to return it to the families that were run off. But when I started asking questions, someone else got word. That's who's hunting us now, Cutter's men. They've been guarding his ghost for years." The woman felt a chill run through her. Then what you whispered? You meant that they'd come for you, not me. He nodded slowly. They'll kill anyone who gets in their way. Outside, a wolf howled in the distance. The sound made her shiver. You could have told me, she said softly. And had you run before we even left the trail? He looked at her, regret flickering in his eyes. You'd have never believed it. Most folks don't. She turned toward the window. The plains stretched endlessly beneath the moonlight, quiet and cold. Somewhere out there, the men were still searching. And somewhere out there lay a piece of paper worth more than life itself. The rancher broke the silence. I buried the deed again, somewhere no one would look. Not even them. She turned back. Where? He shook his head. Safer you don't know. A gust of wind rattled the walls. She crossed her arms against the chill. So what now? We wait, he said. If they can't find us before sunrise, we head east. There's an old trail that leads through the ridge. I've got a friend in Santa Fe who can help. She sat beside him, the floor creaking under their weight. Her mind was still spinning from everything he'd said. The truth made everything feel heavier. The danger, the fear, the strange sense of purpose behind it all. For a while, neither of them spoke. The fire's glow from the distant plains flickered faintly through the cracks in the wall, painting orange streaks across the floorboards. Then came another sound, a faint creak above them, like a footstep. She stiffened, glancing up. The rancher noticed it too. His hand went to his revolver. Stay quiet, he whispered. They waited. The noise came again, this time closer. A slow, dragging step across the roof, her pulse raced. They found us, she breathed. Not yet, he said. But they will. He motioned toward a trapdoor near the back of the cabin. There's a root cellar below, go. She hesitated. And you? I'll keep them busy, she shook her head. No, not again. I'm not leaving you this time. His eyes softened, but there was no room for argument. You're not leaving, he said quietly. You're surviving. The footsteps stopped. Silence pressed against the cabin walls. Then, 3 hard knocks on the door. Rancher, a voice called, deep and calm. We just want to talk. The woman's breath caught. The rancher said nothing, his revolver steady in his hand. Another knock. You can end this clean, the voice said. Hand it over and we'll let the lady walk free. She looked at him, her eyes wide. They don't mean that, she whispered. He nodded. I know. The door rattled as someone tried the latch. The rancher raised his weapon. Go. He whispered to her one last time. She backed toward the trapdoor, her hands shaking. As she lifted it, she glanced back and saw his silhouette framed in the thin moonlight. Steady and still, then she slipped below, closing the door just as the cabin exploded with the sound of splintering wood and shouting voices. From below, she could hear boots pounding, the deep thud of struggle, and then silence again. She pressed her hands over her mouth, holding back a sob. The earth smelled of dust and roots. She waited in the dark, not knowing who had survived, or if the man who had risked everything to save her still breathed above. Outside, the fire spread farther across the plains, its orange glow reflecting against the clouds. And somewhere in that vast emptiness, the truth about what the rancher had hidden, and why, was waiting to come to light. The root cellar smelled damp, earthy, and faintly of old flour sacks. She crouched low, pressing her back against the rough stone wall, listening to the faint pounding of the men outside. Their voices carried over the gulch, harsh and impatient, punctuated by the occasional bark of a command. Somewhere a horse neighed, the sound distorted and hollow in the night. She thought of the rancher above, still holding the men at bay. Every instinct told her he wouldn't last long. She gripped the edge of a crate and peered through a small crack in the door, trying to catch a glimpse of what was happening. A lantern's glow swung across the cabin's roof, illuminating the silhouettes of several men. They moved with purpose, methodical and relentless. Her mind raced back to the deed, the reason for all of this bloodshed. She pictured it in her mind's eye, the heavy, weathered paper that could undo years of theft and injustice. She realized the truth. This wasn't just about land or money. It was about pride, vengeance, and the stubborn grip of history. Cutter's legacy wasn't just in the hills and plains. They were in the men's hearts who believed the land was theirs by right, no matter what law or truth said. Above, a crash echoed through the cabin. She jumped, heart thundering. The rancher's voice called down, low and urgent. Stay quiet. Don't come up. I'm not coming up. She hissed back, though her hands shook. She wanted to help him. She wanted to be part of the fight, but the reality pressed down hard. If she exposed herself, both of them could die. Footsteps circled the building. The faint scrape of metal against wood made her flinch. The men were searching every angle, trying to flush them out. Her pulse raced with every sound. She realized she didn't even know how many were outside. 5, 10, more. Each shadow seemed alive, each movement a threat. Then came another sound, a soft, deliberate whistle. It was the same call from the night before, the one that had made her blood run cold. Someone was coordinating the search, guiding the others through the darkness. She pressed herself lower. If the rancher fell, if they discovered the deed before he could protect it, she didn't even want to imagine it. Time stretched. The hours crawled. Somewhere above, she heard the metallic ring of the revolver being cocked, the steady rhythm of someone moving and firing. The rancher was still alive. He was still fighting. But the men were patient. They had all night, and they knew the terrain better than he did. A shadow fell across the cellar door. She held her breath, pressing herself further back. The wood groaned, and then a voice, deep, calm, and almost cruel, spoke. "We know you're in there. The lady doesn't need to get hurt." The rancher shouted something she couldn't hear clearly, and then a series of gunshots rang out. The cellar shook slightly with the force. Her knees trembled, but she forced herself to stay still. She didn't dare look up. The seconds dragged. She thought about the families the rancher had spoken of, the ones who had been run off the land years ago. She thought of the cruel winter, the sickness and the revenge that had followed. It felt like the ghosts of that time were still here, alive in the hearts of these men, and she understood suddenly that this fight was bigger than either of them, bigger than the ranch, bigger than one stolen deed. It was about history itself, who got to claim it, who got to rewrite it, and who got left behind. Another noise, a scraping sound along the side of the cellar. She froze, listening. The men were probing every inch, every shadow. They had ropes, hooks, whatever tools they could find to drag them out. The thought made her stomach twist. Above, a shout broke through the chaos. The rancher's voice, calm, commanding, cut through the night. "This ends tonight one way or another." She pressed her hands over her mouth, suddenly aware that she could hear her own pulse pounding. The heat from the distant fire crept through the earth, faint but oppressive. Smoke began to drift through the cracks of the cellar ceiling. She coughed, covering her nose and mouth, the tension making her throat raw. She couldn't stop thinking about the deed. Whoever held it, whoever controlled it, could change everything. And yet the deed wasn't just paper, it was a symbol, a promise, a temptation. And temptation was deadly. The men outside weren't after justice. They were after power, and they would destroy anything and anyone to get it. A sound of splintering wood made her flinch. The men were breaking in, methodical and relentless. She pressed herself into the corner, clutching a wooden beam. Her mind darted through every escape she could think of, the creek, the tunnel, the ridge, but she realized the reality. They couldn't outrun them. Not now. She heard the rancher moving above, his boots heavy on the wooden floor, each step a rhythm of defiance. Then another shout, a grunt, the sound of someone being thrown against a wall. Her stomach dropped. She imagined his blood, his life spilling onto the floor. The thought made her dizzy. The firelight from outside danced across the cellar wall through the small cracks. Shadows moved like phantoms. She realized that she could almost see the men in their minds, their greed, their fury, their determination. Every flicker of movement above was a threat. Every whisper of the wind carried danger. A low whistle echoed through the gulch again. It was a warning. The men were regrouping. They were smarter than she had imagined. And worse, they weren't afraid of death. They were driven by something older, something personal. She felt a hand brush against her arm. She spun, heart leaping, and found the rancher crouched in the shadow. His eyes were dark, fierce but tired. "We don't have much time," he whispered. "They'll breach the mill soon. We need to make a move before they flush us out." She nodded, trying to steady her trembling hands. "But where do we go?" He glanced toward the wall, toward the narrow tunnel that led beyond the mill. "Through there. If we can reach the ridge, we might have a chance, but it's going to be close. You'll need to trust me completely." The words hung in the air, heavy with promise and threat. She could hear the men moving above, hear their voices sharp and cruel. The fire outside had grown, the orange glow creeping closer to the cabin like fingers searching for them. She swallowed hard, gripping the beam. "I trust you," she whispered. "Good," he said, his voice barely audible over the growing chaos. "Because if we fail, there's nothing left of either of us." The sound of breaking wood above made them both flinch. Dust fell from the ceiling. The men were almost inside. He took her hand, pulling her toward the hidden tunnel. "On my signal," he said. "We run. She nodded, her pulse in her throat, her every nerve alive with fear. The sound of boots above grew louder. Splintered wood rattled. The first glimpse of firelight cut through the cellar doorway. The rancher's grip tightened. "Now!" he shouted. They bolted, sprinting toward the tunnel as the firelight swirled around the cabin. She could hear the men shouting behind them, the cracking of the floorboards, the roar of the growing blaze. Smoke filled the air. She gasped, the acrid stench burning her lungs, but she kept running. The tunnel yawned before them like a dark mouth. She slipped inside first, pulling the rancher with her. The walls were cold, damp, pressing close, but they were alive, moving, surviving. Above, the cabin erupted in chaos, shouts and gunfire filling the night. The heat pressed down, but they were moving, escaping, still alive. Yet the deed, the men, the danger, they weren't gone. They were close, too close, and the night was far from over. The gulch seemed endless. Every step forward carried the weight of what awaited them, the truth. The men hunting them and the secret that could destroy them both. She pressed on. One step behind him, breath ragged, heart pounding, knowing that the moment of confrontation, the moment when everything would come to a head, was fast approaching. Somewhere ahead, the ridge waited. Somewhere ahead, the night would decide whether they lived, or whether history's shadows would finally catch them. And somewhere in that darkness, the secret of the land, the deed, the vengeance, and the price of what they protected, loomed like a storm about to break. The smoke from the distant fire drifted into the cabin, carrying with it the sharp, acrid scent that made her eyes water. She hugged her knees, trying to steady herself, while the rancher rested against the wall, his breathing shallow but steady. Dawn was hours away, and the night seemed endless. Each sound outside, the snap of a branch, the rustle of grass, the occasional distant shout, making her flinch. "We won't make it to sunrise if they keep circling like that," she said quietly. He looked at her, eyes dark but firm. "We don't need to outrun them. We need to outsmart them. That's why I buried the deed where I did. Whoever they are, they'll never think to look there." Her curiosity wrestled with fear. "Why not tell me? Why not let me help?" He gave a faint, tired smile. "Because this isn't just about surviving. It's about trusting the land. Sometimes the right place, the right hiding is more important than strength or skill. That deed, it's more than paper. It's proof. Proof that what's stolen can be returned, and that justice doesn't always arrive the way you expect." She nodded, understanding only a part of what he meant. There was a weight in his voice, a kind of history he carried that went beyond the current danger. It was the weight of generations, of wrongs that had festered, of people who refused to let go of what they believed was theirs. Hours passed in silence. The fire had grown smaller, retreating with the darkness, but the menace outside hadn't. The wind shifted, carrying with it the faint scent of smoke and gunpowder, reminding them both that the threat was real, immediate. Suddenly, a voice pierced the stillness, low and commanding. "We know you're in there. Come out and it won't get worse for you." The rancher stiffened, a hand tightening on the empty revolver he had rested beside him. "They think words can make this easier," he muttered. "But they've never been tested by the land," she shivered. "What do you mean?" "People who care more about revenge than reason can't see what's obvious," he said. "We've survived this far because we understand the land. They don't, not really." The woman looked at him, admiration mixed with fear. There was courage in his calmness, but also a knowledge that the moment of confrontation was inevitable. And soon, all the preparation, all the careful hiding and running would come to a head. Hours later, the first gray light of dawn began to seep into the cabin through cracks in the walls. The men outside had paused, perhaps regrouping, perhaps waiting for the cover of the night to vanish completely. The rancher stood slowly, testing his legs. She could see the fatigue in his movements, but also the determination. "We move soon," he said. "If we stay here too long, they'll surround us. We need to reach the ridge before they figure out the tunnel." She nodded, helping him to gather what they could carry. Every step was careful, deliberate. Each sound from outside made them freeze, listening. The threat wasn't just physical, it was psychological. They had to think faster, anticipate faster, or the night's dangers would catch them. They emerged from the cabin, the creek whispering beside them, mist curling over the water in the early light. The terrain was rough, uneven, but familiar enough from their desperate flight. Every shadow seemed alive, every rustle in the grass a potential danger. She kept close to him, eyes sharp, heart pounding. The ridge came into view, a faint outline against the brightening sky. Reaching it would mean safety, at least for a while, but the men hunting them were persistent. She could hear them moving again, horses stirring, voices carrying across the plains. The rancher paused. We need to split if they get too close. One path to the ridge, the other to the old hollow. Meet me there if you can. I'm not leaving you, she whispered, a mix of defiance and fear. You will if we both survive, he said firmly. Go now. She took a deep breath and ran, boots splashing in the creek, water spraying around her. Her eyes were fixed on the ridge, but every step was calculated, every movement cautious. Behind her, she could hear the faint sound of pursuit. Horses pounding, men shouting. Halfway up, she stumbled, catching herself on a rock. The rancher appeared beside her, steadying her. Careful, he whispered. Almost there. They reached the top just as the sun broke fully over the horizon, painting the plains in gold and orange. The men below were still searching, but the elevation gave them a vantage point, and the terrain made it harder for the pursuers to advance quickly. They paused, catching their breath, hearts hammering, eyes scanning for the last traces of danger. The woman looked at the rancher, sweat and dust streaking her face. We made it, she said, but even as the words left her lips, she knew the danger wasn't gone. The deed, the men, and the shadow of Cutter's legacy still loomed over them. He placed a hand on her shoulder. We survived the night. That's the first step. The land still belongs to no one until it's proven who can honor it, protect it. That deed, it's more than a piece of paper. It's a promise that wrongs can be righted. She nodded, understanding now the gravity of what they had been through. It wasn't just survival. It was about justice, history, and courage. It was about standing for something even when the world was against you. In the distance, the men had finally given up for the moment, retreating into the plains with curses and frustration. Smoke still rose from the cabin, but the ridge had granted them a moment of safety. The rancher looked out across the landscape, eyes scanning the horizon. We'll return the deed, he said softly, to those who were wronged. It's the only way to set this right, and the only way to ensure the land can heal from all the hate that's been sown here. She looked at him, a newfound respect and understanding filling her chest. The terror of the night, the fire, the chase, it had forged a bond between them, one born of shared danger and trust. I'll help, she said firmly. He smiled, faint but real. Then we'll make sure this land remembers who truly belongs to it. Not through violence, not through revenge, but through truth. They stayed there for a while, breathing in the morning air, the plains quiet except for the gentle rush of the creek below. The world was waking up, and with it came the realization that their fight wasn't over, but that they had survived the most dangerous night of their lives. The woman thought of the families who had been driven off the land, the men consumed by revenge, and the history that had been buried beneath the soil. She understood now that courage wasn't just about holding a gun or running from danger. It was about knowing what was right and holding on to it, even when it meant facing a legacy of violence. The rancher turned to her. We can't forget what happened here, but we don't have to be trapped by it. The land will forgive us if we honor it, she nodded. And we will. They began to descend the ridge toward the next leg of their journey, careful, alert, but unafraid. The sun climbed higher, illuminating the plains in warm light, showing both the scars of the past and the promise of the future. Somewhere below, the fire smoldered in the ruins of the cabin. Somewhere across the land, Cutter's men would lick their wounds, plotting but powerless to undo what had been accomplished. The deed was safe, the truth was preserved, and the legacy of justice they carried would shape the days ahead. And as they walked together, side by side, the woman realized that survival had never been the point. The point had always been courage, trust, and standing for what was right, no matter how dark the night, no matter how dangerous the plains. They disappeared into the distance, the ridge behind them fading in golden shadow, carrying with them a story of survival, justice, and hope. A story that would not be forgotten. The land was theirs to honor now, and they would.